Hello everyone, how's it going? In this video we will talk about what is a Git Ignore. When we make commits in a Git repository, we choose which files to stage and commit by using git add and then git a commit command. But what if there are some files that we never want to commit? It's too easy to accidentally commit them, especially when we are using a git add with a period to stage all files in the current directory. That's where a git ignore file comes in handy. It lets Git know that it should ignore certain files and not track them. So now the question is, what kind of files should we ignore? So there are some files that we want to ignore. For example, the log files, files with API keys, secrets, or credentials, or sensitive information. Useless system files like that we have this dstore file on macOS. Generated files, for example, we get .class files in case of a Java project, and dependencies which can be downloaded from a package manager. So these are some files that we want to ignore. So to demonstrate how we can ignore files, I'm going to make a directory called logs, and inside of it I'm going to make some files. So let's create the directory first, and for that I'm going to type mkdir and I'm going to call my directory logs. So with this command we are going to create a directory inside of example folder. Now inside of our log directory I'm going to create a text file called sample.txt. So let's first navigate to the log directory. So I'm going to type cd logs. And now we are inside of logs directory and I'm going to create a file. So I'm going to type echo hello to, and I'm going to name my file sample.txt. So with this command I'm going to create a file called sample and write hello inside of that file. Now let's go back to our example directory. So I'm going to type cd double dot. And inside of this directory I'm going to type git status. So here Git is saying that we have an untracked directory called logs, which is not staged yet, as we can see that this is marked with red. But we don't want to add this directory to the staging area because we don't want Git to track this. So how we can ignore this directory, or how we can add this directory to the Git Ignore? So now the question is, what is Git Ignore and how does it work? So Git Ignore is a plain text file where each line contains a pattern for files or directories that we want to ignore. Generally, this is placed inside the root folder of the repository, and that's what I recommend. To create a Git Ignore file, I'm going to type echo. As of now, I'm not going to add anything in the file, so I'm going to echo null to .gitignore. So this file only has an extension, it doesn't have a name. So now we are going to type ls to list the files inside of the project, and ls-a actually. Oops, sorry. I'm going to clear the screen and I'm going to type ls-a. So here we can see we have the .gitignore file inside of our project's root directory. And now we want to add logs directory to the gitignore file. So to do that, I'm going to type echo logs /to.gitignore. So this is how we instruct Git to ignore whatever is mentioned inside this file and do not track this. Now I'm going to open this file, and inside this file we have a single entry called logs /, which indicates that this is a directory. We can list as many files and directories as we want here. So for example, we can type main.class, and we can also use patterns. So for example, I'm going to type steric.txt to ignore all the files with a txt extension. Once we are done, we're going to save the changes. Now I'm going to close this file, and back to the terminal, let's run git status one more time. So here we can see that Git no longer says that we have a new directory called logs because it's ignoring that file. But we get a new file called .ignore, which we can add to the staging area and then commit to permanently store it in the repository. So let's add this gitignore file to the staging area and let's commit our code. So I'm going to type a git add period. And to commit, I'm going to type a git commit -m, and I'm going to call gitignore added. I'm going to press enter. And here we can see that our gitignore file is permanently stored in the repository. One important thing to keep in mind is that gitignore only works if we have not already included a file or a directory in the repository. To say this more simply, if we accidentally include a file in the repository and then later add it to the gitignore, Git is not gonna ignore that. To prove this, I'm going to make a directory called source, and inside of it, I'm going to create a file called file1.txt. So let's clear the screen. So now I'm going to make a directory called source. So mkdir src. And inside of it, I'm going to create a file called file1.txt. So echo hello to src/file1.txt. Now I'm going to press enter. Now let's run git status one more time. And here we can see that we have nothing to commit. Oh, maybe that's because I have added all the text files in Gitignore. So I'm going to remove that. Let's open a Gitignore files and I'm gonna delete this. Now I'm going to save this file and let's run git status one more time. Oops, that's spelled incorrectly. And here we can see that we have the source directory appearing inside of our this logs that we have printed on the screen. And we have a modified file .ignore. Now we want to accidentally commit our new directory, which is a source, to the repository. So first I'm going to clear the screen. And I'm going to type git status one more time. Now I'm going to type git add period, and I'm gonna type git commit to permanently store our changes in the repository. src added. And here we can see our files are committed. So we have committed our source directory to the repository, but we forgot to add that to Gitignore. So now let's try to add this to see what happens. So I'm going to open Gitignore file and I'm going to add src / to Gitignore file. I'm going to save the changes. Now let's run git status. And here we can see we have a modified gitignore file because we added source directory to that file. I'm going to add this to our staging area. And now we are going to commit the changes. src added to git ignore. That's perfect. So we have permanently stored our modified gitignore file to the repository. Now in this case, Git is not gonna ignore the changes in this directory because it is already tracking this directory. So let's modify our file1.txt, which was inside src folder. So I'm gonna type echo hello world, oops, to src / file1.txt. I'm gonna press enter. Now let's run git status. Look, Git is saying that this file is modified, which proves that Git is not ignoring this. To solve this problem, we have to remove this file from the staging area. So in the previous video, we talked about git ls-files. This command is used to show all the files that we have in the staging area. So here we can see that we have the source directory in the staging area. We should remove it here. So how we can do that? Remember, we want to remove this file only from the staging area and not from our working directory. So to do that, we type git rm-cached. So and -r src /. So this is the command that we use to remove the src directory from the staging area. I'm going to press enter, and our directory is now removed from the staging area, and we can verify that using the same command. So git ls-files. So here we can see that we don't have the src directory in the staging area. Now let's run git status, and first let me clear the screen. Now let's run git status one more time. And here we can see that we have one change, which is the deletion of src directory from the staging area. So we are going to commit this, git add all, git commit -m, and I'm gonna call this removed src from staging area. I'm going to press enter to permanently store this change to the repository. Now from this point forward, Git is no longer going to track changes made to this directory. So to prove this, I'm going to make some changes to one of the files inside the src folder. So I'm going to echo test2 src /file1.txt. Now let's run git status one more time. And here we can see our working directory is clean. We have nothing to commit. So that's it for this video. And in this video, we saw how we can use Gitignore to ignore the files that we don't want in our repository.